Is everybody good? Is everybody good? Good. We're going to go on 3. 3, 2. I am Kyle Velakapitsky, Executive Director of the New York State Parent-Teacher Association. We are here today with colleagues to say to our legislature, please do not pass this legislation tomorrow. On behalf of our 2.6 million school children and their families, we are truly disappointed and disheartened that the bill to legalize recreational marijuana is moving tomorrow in the legislature. We want to be clear. A yes vote on this bill is a vote to hurt our children. This bill will make our roads less safe. This bill will mentally and physically harm our children, and it will lead to death. I'm here to introduce the rest of our colleagues today. Joining us and speaking today is Vice President Amani Dagame from New York State PTA and Board of Director member Roberto Rijos, who will be speaking in Spanish. Also joining us today is immediate past President and Oneida County Sheriff Rob Mashel and Under Sheriff Joe Lissy. Also joining us is the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police Executive Director Patrick Fallon. Executive Director from the Rural Schools Association, David Little. The Director of Communications from the Associated Building and Contractors Empire State Chapter, Santino Thomas. Carol Raymond from Smart Approaches to Marijuana. And Tom Stebbins from the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. I will first introduce Sheriff Mashel. Sheriff?
Thank you, Kyle. Good afternoon, everyone. Certainly, this has been a topic that has been very important to the sheriffs of New York State. Something we've been very passionate about, and I'm proud to stand here and represent the New York State Sheriff's Association as we continue to work to fight this legalization bill. Sheriffs take an oath of office to uphold certainly the Constitution, but also to keep their people safe. And the sheriffs across New York State feel united in saying that if this bill is passed, our people in each of our respective counties will be less safe. You know, sheriffs, we focus on public safety, and like I said, legalizing marijuana will certainly make our communities less safe. We feel strongly that we should be taking the time to look at the mistakes that other states have made. Let's learn from those mistakes. Let's not repeat them. Whether we're talking about traffic safety data, which you'll hear the State Chiefs Association talk about in a few minutes, whether we're talking about other safety factors on the road, whether we talk about various facets of the effects of marijuana, many of which we don't know. We talk about the effects it's going to have on our children, which are the futures of our communities. There are so many unknowns here, and the only thing we've been asking all along certainly is to take the time to learn from other people's mistakes. Let's take the time as we work through this, and like I said, let's not repeat those mistakes. So certainly the sheriffs in New York State stand united in opposition to this. We are asking our legislators to vote no to this bill, and certainly, like I said, we stand united with our colleagues across the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Now David Little, the Executive Director of the Rural Schools Association.
Make no mistake, friends, what we're witnessing here is the collapse of competence of our state leaders on this issue. This isn't about money. They took this out of the state budget because it'll have a negligible influence on the state budget this year in terms of revenue. It's not about the proper medicinal use of marijuana. That's been taken care of. It's not even about over-enforcement in our minority communities because of decriminalization last year. This is about the fact that our state leaders don't have the moral backbone to say no to people who simply want to get high for fun. This is the recreational use of marijuana. And just like a 21-year-old waits for that day when they can take their first legal drink, we are now going to socialize our children by adult legal use of marijuana in the home to socialize them for that day when they turn 21 and they can start taking recreational drugs legally. If you think that this won't filter down to our schools, you're sadly mistaken, and you're no student of history. I would say that the appropriate time for us to pass the legalization of marijuana for recreational use in our state is right after the state of New York has figured out how to keep alcohol out of the hands of kids, because it's never been able to do that. How to keep cigarettes and vaping products out of the hands of kids, and they've never been able to do that. And most importantly, how to keep opioids out of the hands of kids, and they failed miserably at doing that. So how in the world that they think that they're going to keep recreational marijuana out of the hands of children and out of our schools is absolutely beyond me. At the very least, they owe their constituents in the state of New York, and particularly our children, the due diligence to figure out what this will cost in terms of law enforcement, what it will cost in terms of social services and mental health for our children before they start to move forward on this issue. They haven't even figured out, and I'm sure the law enforcement folks will tell you, they haven't even figured out in this legislation how they're going to measure how stoned you are in the car. There's no BAC, there's no breathalyzer for this. And the due diligence that they have is the way they're going to be able to tell whether they have probable cause or not for you to get out of the car and test you about it is whether or not it looks like your car hit a skunk. Right? The smell of the product is the only thing they've got going for them. We are way too early on this, folks. Way too early. And our children will suffer because of it. So I urge our state leaders to reconsider and hold this off until the time is right. Thanks.
Next speaking will be Executive Director Patrick Phelan from the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. We oppose this legislation based entirely on traffic safety standards. The traffic safety standards and concerns of the State Chiefs Association have not been properly addressed in this legislation. There is no reliable roadside test for marijuana impairment. There is no agreed upon scientific standard for impairment or intoxication by means of marijuana. And there aren't nearly enough drug recognition experts in the state of New York. There are just about 200 in the entire state. We need about 5 times that, I would estimate, to properly combat drug-impaired driving. And the fact that the legislature has included some measures in this legislation, including commencing studies and dedicating funds toward making more DREs, is the height of insanity. It's akin to saying we're on a broken airplane and we're going to take off and we're going to fix everything once we get up there. You need to prepare for the impaired driving issues before you legalize the drug. It simply makes sense. In every state where marijuana has been legalized, you've seen an increase in traffic accidents and traffic fatalities. It's just fact. We know that this is going to happen. We know that there'll be more impaired drivers on the road once we legalize marijuana. We need to prepare for that and have the law enforcement issues in place before legalizing marijuana. It's that simple. They haven't done that. They haven't made any effort to do that. And it's ridiculous, really. It's ridiculous and irresponsible. And to call this a taxation issue, we're standing in front of a house with people that have no idea how to manage money. They're $6 billion in debt. They don't have the first clue how to manage money. The taxation of marijuana won't change a thing. Thank you very much.
Next we'll hear from the Associated Builders and Contractors Empire State Chapter, Santino Thomas.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll keep my comments brief as it's a little chilly. At the end of the day, as an organization, ABC had to ask itself if legalization of recreational use marijuana would be a benefit to our membership, which is comprised of hundreds of contractors around the state and the thousands upon thousands that they employ. And the short answer to that is no. In fact, our membership is incredibly concerned that the state seems poised to legalize recreational use marijuana. New York remains the only state in the nation that is an absolute liability state. We have the scaffold law here in New York State, and that law states that should a worker be hurt on the job site, regardless of any extenuating circumstances, the contractor bears full responsibility. That includes being under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, or other drugs. And that's outrageous to begin with, which is why ABC has always been in full support of a repeal of the of the Scaffold Act. That being said, the situation, when it presents itself, and it will, it's only a matter of time, when the situation presents itself and all of a sudden our contractors find themselves fighting for their jobs, for their livelihood, and we're going to have all the hundreds and thousands of workers that our contractors employ concerned for their jobs and their families and how they put food on the table. And when that does happen, it'll be because of the short-sightedness of this legislature and the governor. As I said, mark my words, the situation will present itself, and we're very concerned about that. So as long as the scaffold law exists in New York State, ABC cannot support the legalization of recreational use marijuana. We just can't be behind it. Too much is at stake. So thank you very much, everyone.
Next we're going to hear in Spanish from Board of Director, New York State PTA, Roberto Rijos.
Buenas tardes. Estoy aquí representando a la Asociación de Padres y Maestros del PTA del Estado de Nueva York. Una pregunta que le digo a todos, ¿cuál es la prisa? Nosotros estamos en contra de esta legislación. Todavía hay muchos datos que no se han perjudicado y no se saben todavía del impacto que va a causar a todos los niños en el estado de Nueva York. Crecer matas en su hogar los expone también a los hijos suyos tener acceso a eso. Ya sabemos lo que pasó con el vaping también. Vamos a tener las mismas consecuencias. Estamos nosotros aquí con la legislación que quieren pasar, creando más problemas que vamos a tener que resolver en muchos años más. Mental, emocional, de adicción. Esto no es legislación justa y no debería pasar. A todos los padres yo les digo, cuiden a sus hijos, porque esta legislación enseguida que pase va a ser un problema para todos ellos y para todos nuestros hijos en el estado de Nueva York. Gracias.
Next we're going to hear from New York State PTA Vice President, Dr. Imani DeGame.
Good afternoon. The thought of legalizing marijuana for recreational use in the midst of a respiratory pandemic is unimaginable, unfathomable, and frankly, unrealistic. But we're here to protect children and to speak on behalf of the children of our state and to protect their health and well-being. And by looking at states that have legalized marijuana previously, we learn lessons, and unfortunately none of them are positive lessons. California, Nevada, and Oregon saw horrible trends of the usage of marijuana significantly increasing among youth after legalizing it for adults. The University of Michigan reported that between 2017 and 2018, the percentage of 8th and 10th graders who were reporting vaping marijuana, and we know we have an issue with vaping, and we're in the forefront of protecting our youth from vaping, rose to 63%. From 2005 to 2015, the number of youth aged 13 to 20 years old who went to urgent care for marijuana-related illnesses went up to 172% higher. In Colorado, after legalization, marijuana-impaired driving deaths rose up to 150% more. According to a 2013 report by the Colorado Department of Public Health, the percentage of adolescent suicides testing positive for marijuana in their blood increased. So between 2014 and 16, 22.4% increase of youth dying with marijuana in their blood. These numbers are much higher than alcohol and other drugs. In Colorado, the annual rate of marijuana-related emergency department visits increased by 62% within 5 years. Marijuana-related poisoning hospitalizations increased in Colorado by 143%. The American Medical Association, the lung association, the American Academy of Pediatrics are all concluding that marijuana is a dangerous drug for children as well as adults. This is a respiratory pandemic. that affects our lungs and destroys our immune system. That's exactly what marijuana does as well. We plead to protect our children and youth from this very dangerous legislature. Thank you.
Now Tom Stebbins from the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York.
Thank you. Our concern today is primarily about worksite safety. There's a law that only exists in New York that says that employers and property owners are 100% liable for a worksite injury, even if the employee was intoxicated at the time they injured themselves or others. If we are going to have more marijuana on our job sites, we're going to have more injuries. And because of the archaic laws in New York, that means we're going to have more claims against our employers, more claims against the state, more claims against our schools, against our cities. And it's going to raise the cost for everybody as we try to build, as we try to renew our infrastructure, as we try to grow MWBEs. So before we legalize marijuana, we need to fix our liability laws, again, that only exist in the state of New York, so that we can truly do this responsibly. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Carol Raymond from the Smart Approaches to Marijuana.
Good afternoon. Carol Raymond on behalf of the Smart Approaches to Marijuana. SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, stands in opposition to this bill to legalize marijuana. This standalone bill should be a complete non-starter for any lawmaker who cares about the future of New York State. It allows the use of marijuana in areas where cigarette smoking and vaping is now banned, places no limits on THC potency, and commercializes yet another intoxicant without a definitive test for impairment. These are just a handful of issues with this bill. Just today, a massive study was published finding youth marijuana users have double the prevalence of a use disorder than users of nicotine, alcohol, and in most categories of users, even prescription drug misuses. We will never let any lawmaker who supports this bill forget the damage they cause. Thank you.
So a last message, and we'll take questions. I stand before you as a mother of a 6th grade student who is in one of our fantastic public schools right now in 6th grade. And his educators and school leaders are doing everything they can to keep him safe. I say to our legislators, if you vote yes on this legislation, you are voting to harm my child. And I say to all of our parents and families out there, you need to be worried about this. You need to call your legislator and tell them to vote no on this. A yes vote is a harm to our children. It is a harm to our 2.6 million school children in our schools. There is absolutely no other way to look at this legislation. A yes vote will harm my son, and it will harm our other 2.6 million school children, and shame on you. I hope tomorrow you have a conscience. You remember all of the things that our law enforcement brothers and sisters have said, that our schools have said, that our brothers and sisters in the trades and our unions have said. This will harm our children, this will make our roads less safe, and this will lead to death. We're happy to take questions. Thank you.
It seems like it's kind of late to be saying this or to have your voice heard. I mean, they announced the three-way agreement.
Sure,
it
Karen.
Like they have to vote, so.
No, I appreciate that. It's my 23rd session. It's not done till it's done. We will continue to fight. I know the people behind me will continue to do that work. If this is passed, it will be a travesty for New York State, but we will seek chapter amendments, we will seek repeals, and then we will work with every municipality to try to pass an opt-out referendum.
How many votes would you have to sway, like in the Senate? Would it be 2 or 3 votes you think that you could turn on this?
We are trying to turn as many as we can.
Do you have a count?
It's a big count, Karen.
For Patrick or any of the law enforcement here, I'm curious about how you feel about the expungement of records for low-level offenses, and additionally, how, if at all, will this affect the black market? Because the black market is often used to connect drugs to crime and violence and all those kinds of things.
I won't speak for the sheriffs, but the expungement of low-level offenses isn't a real big concern. Low-level possession is a violation in the state of New York, which is a traffic ticket, and you can have a fairly decent amount of marijuana and it's still a misdemeanor. So the narrative that people are sitting in jail on low-level possession offenses is just not true. So that's smoke and mirrors. That's not accurate. What was the other question?
When you are looking at probable cause for searching vehicles and the black market is often connected to violent crime in the inner city.
Yeah.
So will the legalization in any way affect the black market as far as your ability to zero in on violent crime and such?
Well, we're lucky that we have other states that have already legalized marijuana. So you can look at that as test cases and see what has happened in those states. In those states, the black market has increased, not decreased, because you're able now to produce marijuana in the legal state and transport it to states where it's not legal. So it's actually increased the black market and driven crime up. It hasn't reduced crime. As far as the probable cause for searching vehicles and people that are stopped, that's going to hurt law enforcement. They've left in there the fact that you're able to use as probable cause to determine if someone is driving while impaired. But a lot of gun and drug arrests come from the odor of marijuana emanating from a vehicle. If that's not probable cause to initiate an investigation other than for impairment, that'll hurt law enforcement, and it'll simply make people less safe. And once again, like the sheriff said, we have a very simple job: is to protect life and property, and that's really all it boils down to. And that's all we're talking about. We're talking about keeping people safe. I'm not talking about stopping a guy from sitting in his backyard smoking a joint. Honestly, I really don't care. But I know that people are going to get in traffic crashes and they're going to die. I know people are going to die because they pass this law, and that's what I'm legitimately concerned about. I'm not just some old guy railing against the legalization of marijuana. People are going to get hurt by this, and that's our concern, and that's what people need to realize. People are going to get hurt and people are going to die, and you have to have the legal means in place to combat those people that are going to go out and drive after they've consumed marijuana. You have to have that in place, or it's going to make things worse.
For the sheriff, did you want to answer that one as well?
Sure, thank you. Just to give you a little background, I've been in law enforcement for 31 years. I've been the sheriff of Oneida County for the past 11, administering the 9th largest county jail in the state. We have never housed anyone in our facility for low-level marijuana possession. We keep hearing that over and over and over again, but no one can show us statistics of people that are currently incarcerated for low-level marijuana possession or doing time. Now, granted, there may be someone that comes in on a much more serious charge, whether it be a robbery or burglary, and there's a marijuana charge attached to that. But we feel strongly that it's a myth when people say that we're locking up people for low-level marijuana possession charges. All the years I worked on the street, any time that someone was charged with a low-level possession of marijuana, they were given an appearance ticket. That's been a non-custodial arrest my entire career. So I don't know where that's coming from. I certainly can't speak for what happens in New York City, but in the upstate counties, that's just not true regarding that issue. Black market issue, it's going to explode. Especially when you look at when someone can purchase marijuana with no tax attached to it, not knowing what they're buying, is how pure is it laced with fentanyl, whatever the case may be, or are they going to buy the 13% or 13.5% sales tax marijuana? Well, more than likely, a lot of people are going to go after the no tax and make that purchase. So certainly, that's going to cause a huge issue for obviously health of people. We look at statistics, again, going back to what I said, learning from other states' mistakes. When you look at the spike in crime, whether we're talking Colorado, specific cities in Colorado, they saw an explosion in crime around the dispensaries, again, directly related to black market. So again, there is a huge concern. There's so many unknowns, and like I said, all we're asking for is learn from other people's mistakes. This is a fight that we've been fighting for several years. The last couple of years, as you know, initially it's been inside a budget, so there was never any debate. This year, because of COVID restrictions, we don't have the traditional venue to actually get our concerns out there. This is how we have to do it, and the press has been very good to us. But again, it's still not the venue that is needed for this serious of an issue. again, like I said, at the end of the day, we are going to make our communities less safe if this is legalized, and our people will certainly be less healthy. So hopefully, did I miss any other questions? Okay, very good. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you also,
Sure.